So we just finished building a system in the brand new HYTE Y40 case. She looks beautiful. Now we're going to turn her on for the first time. Then we're going to go ahead and flash the BIOS, configure the BIOS, install Windows, install all of the drivers, and get you up and going to play your favorite game, to edit your videos, to do whatever you do with your PC. A few things we need to do before we get started on that. You're going to need 2 thumb drives, one for Windows 11 or Windows 10 if you still want to use that, and one for the drivers and the BIOS. They can't be the same thumb drive. Then after that, you'll need a PC to make these 2 thumb drives for Windows 10 or 11 and for those drivers. So let me show you real quick how to get all the drivers and the BIOS on here, and then I'll go ahead and link up above how to make a Windows 11 thumb drive. So we'll pop in our thumb drive for the BIOS and the drivers. Then we'll go to this PC. Then we'll right click on that thumb drive and select Format. Now when that pops up, we want to make sure our file system is FAT32. It's okay to leave this default. Name it whatever you like to. We don't need to change it. And make sure that quick format is set to checked. Then we'll click Start. This takes a few seconds. And click OK. All right, all done. Click OK here and close. This is completely empty, and that's okay. That's what we want it to be. So then over here, we'll type in the manufacturer and model number of our motherboard, the ASRock X670E PRO RS. And then right over here is the link to the support site. Click on that, and then we'll click Support. Over here, we click Download. Now we'll download all the latest drivers. So audio, Bluetooth. We'll skip the chipset. We're going to get that later on. Realtek LAN. We don't need the RAID Expert or the SATA floppy or the AMD graphics drivers. Then we'll select MediaTek wireless LAN driver. If you'd like to download the ASRock motherboard utility, then we'll come down here a little bit more towards the beta. I don't mind getting the betas. We'll get the Blazing OC tuner and the ASRock Polychrome RGB version 2.0. Okay, and we'll also get the auto driver installer. A lot of these I'm not actually going to use. I'm just showing you how to download them. I'm mainly going to focus on the drivers we need to get everything working, and then a few of the extra applications. You can use the rest if you'd like. And then we'll come up here and click on BIOS. We'll download the latest BIOS, 1.18 at the time of this video. Download. And then while all that's downloading, we'll come up here and we'll type AMD.com. We'll go to Downloads and Support. Radeon Graphics and AMD chipset, and click drivers. Now here I'll select chipset, AM5, and then the X670E and click submit. And then I'll download the Windows 11 X64 edition drivers and download here. Now because this system is using an NVIDIA card for video, up here I'll click NVIDIA.com and then drivers, GeForce RTX 40 series, GeForce RTX 4090 series, 11, game ready drivers, and search. And then we'll download this and download again. Then after downloading, we'll either go through File Explorer or here we'll click on the little triangle up, show in folder, and then we'll select from the graphics drivers to the very last driver here. We'll right click, show more options, send to, we'll send it to that thumb drive. This might take a minute. Now, since our next step is flashing the BIOS, this part's incredibly important. So now that we've copied over all the drivers and BIOS file, we'll come over to that thumb drive, ESD, USB. Then on the thumb drive here, we'll find all the drivers and the BIOS files and everything. Now, one thing I highly recommend, here you can see it shows .zip and maybe .exe, but by default, it doesn't show all of those. So what you need to do so that you can see what those are is click View, then click Show, and place a check next to file name extensions. If not, they're all going to look like this, and you may not know exactly what they are. Mind you, the icon will tell you, but if you don't know, you don't know. So again, File, Show, File Name Extensions. Now here is that BIOS file. It's called X670E Pro, and it ends with ROM. Without that .zip, you might think that's the ROM file, but that's wrong. So we'll just double click on it, right click and copy that. We'll head back one folder and we'll paste that ROM file at the root of that thumb drive. So you can see those icons look very different. And if we weren't showing the file extensions, you might think that is the ROM, but this is the ROM. If you go to flash the BIOS and the ROM file is inside the zip file, the BIOS has no idea what that is. So you need to make sure to extract that ROM file to the root of that thumb drive. Now let's go ahead and connect the machine real quick. So now on the back of the machine, first off, we'll go ahead and plug in all the USB devices we have. Now I'll plug in the Ethernet. And if you're going to be using Wi-Fi, we'll go ahead and connect the Wi-Fi adapter, or the antenna, I should say. Then we'll plug in our video card. You're going to be using HDMI or DP here. Because I'm connected to a capture card, I'll be using HDMI. And then make sure you connect to the video card, not to the motherboard up here, because then you'll be using the graphics up here, not the graphics you just paid for down here. And finally, we'll connect the power. Not that it needs to be in this port, but the BIOS has a BIOS flashing port over here through USB. So I'll go ahead and connect my thumb drive there. That's the one that has the drivers in the BIOS. This is my Windows 11 install. So I'll go ahead and turn her on for the first time. All right, and I tapped the delete key a bunch of times to get into the BIOS. Now you may have heard that annoying wailing pitch at the very beginning. This is my first 670 board. I'm not exactly sure how the rest sound, but it does that every time on this particular board. Now, if you saw my other video, I did have a bunch of issues, not related to this board, but they may have caused issues. I don't know just yet. So in the BIOS, we'll come over here to Tool, then we'll go to Instant Flash. Now don't worry if your system automatically turned off, then turned back on. That's completely normal in this board for this BIOS process. Flashing to the latest BIOS is always incredibly important because the latest BIOS update fixes so many things. On your board, see what BIOS version you're on and see how many fixes there are from your BIOS version till the latest BIOS version. A lot of those fixes you might need yourself. But anyway, aside from that, DDR5 wasn't officially supported correctly, if anything, on the earlier BIOSes. The newer BIOSes corrected all those issues. So another incredibly important reason to update. Let's keep going. After you flash your BIOS and you restart, you're going to want to start tapping the delete key to go back into the BIOS. So now when we're back into the BIOS, we'll do a quick setup over here. We'll go into OC Tweaker. When we're in OC Tweaker, we'll come down to DRAM profile configuration. We'll press enter on DRAM profile setting. For XMP or Expo profile, we want to use that our memory supports. I'll go ahead and use the Expo 6200 since we're on AMD. And then we'll come out over there. Then, of course, you can always set all your presets, your GPU overclocking and graphics overclocking. I'm showing you the basics here on setting up your BIOS. We'll come over to Advanced, and under PCI configuration, we'll make sure that above 4G and resizable bar are both enabled. Under onboard device configuration, this turns on or off the RGB. I'll go ahead and leave mine on, but if this is in your bedroom and it's hard to sleep with it on, you might want to set that to off. You see how it turned it off here? So I'm just going to turn it back on. Then here, display property. If we're using an external card like we are here, we'll set it to external. If we're using onboard video, we'll select internal graphics. HB audio, onboard LAN, WAN radio, and Bluetooth. We'll enable all of those, setting the bottom one to enabled as well. Trusted computing. For Windows 11, we do need TPM 2.0, so make sure that security device support is enabled here. This is all for overclocking, so I'll go ahead and leave that up to you. We're not going to worry about that in this video. Tool, we don't worry about this part. HW monitor is incredibly important, especially because we have liquid cooling. So here we'll scroll down to the very bottom. Now we have nothing connected to CPU fan number 1, so we can leave that as silent. CPU fan 2 WP switch. Under CPU fan control mode, auto, we'll set that to PWM mode. And then under here, silent mode, if you want it to be a little bit louder, we can select full speed. We can select performance mode, which is a little bit quieter. We could select standard mode, or we can select silent mode. Then here we can select the monitor CPU, step up and step down. Myself, I'm gonna go ahead and leave it for standard. We can always play with that a little bit later on. These side fans are connected to that CPU fan header too. And we'll go ahead and set the next one to PWM as well. And the fan pump header is plugged in right over here. You notice as we enable things, this starts to get a little bit louder. PWM mode here as well. If you don't have anything connected, it's not going to cause anything bad. Now I just remembered on the build, I did have the 3-pin fans connected to fan 3 and fan 4. Those are DC fans, so I'll lower those to DC mode. And let's see what else. And fan tuning configures all your fans for you, so you don't need to worry about this. Okay, and when that's done, it's potentially perfectly tuned. We'll find out a little bit later on. We'll click OK here. And then fantastic is where we can set all of our fans. Over here we can set them for silent, standard, performance, full speed, customize, and then over here we can select the individual fans. Now what I mean by setting your own fans, so if we went to fan number 2, we can either leave it here to monitor the CPU, or if you want the percentage higher, raise it here from 25 to 50. And here from 57 to 75 maybe. We'll apply. And then over here, apply that as well. That way we have a higher fan curve and everything because we're on fan number 2. But we can change everything here. And just make sure you're all on the correct profile over here. Coming out of here, then we're under security. Here we can set passwords for the BIOS and secure boot as well. And then boot here is incredibly important. Windows Boot Manager, this tells you what is the first boot option. So if we click here, we can see the first boot option is the Samsung 870 EVO, but we want the Sovereign. So what we do is we'll select it here, and then down here we'll select the EVO. So now the first boot device is the Sovereign Rocket, and the second boot device, we'll press escape here, the second one will be the EVO. The third one will be our thumb drive. So I'm gonna go ahead, remove the thumb drive. I'm gonna pop in the Windows 11 thumb drive right now. Since we've already flashed the BIOS. Okay, CSM, we'll keep that disabled. We don't want to launch Pixie or the storage OPROM policy. And if you'd like to keep your boot logos enabled perfect, maybe you want to disable fast boot. That disables a few of the extra features during boot. I don't mind if my system takes 12 seconds instead of 8 seconds to boot. That's okay. And let's see. So now we're going to go ahead, save and exit, F10 to save and exit. Here it shows all of the changes we've made. And then we're going to boot back into the BIOS to boot from the thumb drive. So 1 sec. Okay, so pressing delete again to go back into the BIOS. We'll click boot up here. And then we'll want to set our thumb drive as the boot option number 1. I didn't set it before because the other thumb drive was in there. So I'll select that here and I'll hit F10 to save and exit and yes. All right, and now it's booting directly to the Windows 11 thumb drive, like we told it in the BIOS. We'll select next here, install now. I'm not going to use a product key here, so I'll select I don't have a product key. We can always install one later. Select Windows 11 Pro or whatever version you have a key for and click next. Make sure you read through all of this. It's incredibly important. I accept and next. We'll do a custom install. Now here we see a bunch of partitions. I always recommend that you install Windows with only one drive in your system because then you won't be exactly sure where to install. But we can see the main drive is a 2 terabyte drive. That's drive 1. All these partitions are part of drive 1. And then this one is a 1 gig and every single drive 0 is part of that 1 gig. But I'm going to go ahead and delete them all. As we delete them, they get added to an unallocated space. So again, I recommend doing this only with a drive that you want to install Windows on. Once you get that drive, you select that drive and you click next. This part will only take maybe 4 minutes, if that. And now we'll click restart now. At this point, we can unplug the Windows 11 thumb drive. All the files have been copied to the drive. Okay, select your country or region and click yes. Select your keyboard layout and click yes. Second keyboard layer, no thank you, skip. Okay, then here we'll name our device. We'll set this up for personal use and next. Unlock your Microsoft experience. Kind of gives you no choice here, so we'll click sign in. 1 sec. Set up as a new device. Next, create a pin. 1 sec. And I'll just leave that there for now. And skip. No thanks. Skip. And I'll skip the 365 trial and the 100 gigs of OneDrive. Now that we're done installing Windows, we'll go ahead and plug in the thumb drive with all the drivers on it. Because this is a new install, it starts installing drivers all on its own. Actually, it looks like it installed the NVIDIA drivers, but that's okay. We'll take care of that in 1 sec here. So now we'll copy over all the drivers to this PC C drive. We'll right click, create a new folder, and we'll call it drivers. And then we'll paste, Control V, all of those drivers onto the C drive. 1 second. All right, so now that we have all of the drivers over here, first off, let's go ahead and delete the BIOS files. We don't need them anymore. Notice that like before on the other machine, we don't see the file extensions. So we'll go to View, Show, File Name Extensions. We'll see they're all .zip. So the best way to handle all of these, because you can't go inside of, let's say, this folder here, go in here, and then install. An installer won't look inside of a zip file. If it's a single exe, maybe, but multiple files, it won't. So the way to handle this is just go into zip file, grab the folder, copy it, go to the root, right click, and paste. So now we're extracting that Dragon 2.5G utility, and now that it's done extracting, we can delete it, and I'm going to do the same for all the rest. So give me 1 quick second. All right, now that we're done extracting all of the files, we can see they're all folders instead of zip files. The very first thing we install is the AMD Chipset driver. That is the foundation for the entire motherboard. Everything is on the motherboard, so that's the most important. So we'll go ahead, double click on that. And UAC does its thing, so we'll click yes here. Now the way I like to do it, other people hate it because it's a security issue, but I hate Windows to keep asking me yes on everything, is I click start, I type UAC, press enter on user account control settings, and I'll drop this down to the bottom and I'll click OK and yes. Now Windows doesn't ask me for everything. When the chipset software installer starts up, there'll be checks on everything. We'll leave that there and we'll select install. Okay, ignore these for right now. They'll pop up a few times during the install. This is the first of many. The chipset software is asking us to restart. It's incredibly important that we restart when drivers or software asks us to restart. I know it takes a few seconds to restart, but whenever it asks you to restart, it has to make changes within the registry or other locked files within Windows. And if you install things over that, it might overwrite those settings, causing problems. You don't want any problems or blue screens or any of that occurring in your OS. You want everything to run perfectly. Click restart. It will only take a few seconds and then we can continue. We'll click restart here. And it looks like let's finish setting up this PC, a Windows update. So we'll click continue here. Skip, skip, decline, decline. Read through all that, but we've already gone through all of this. Just one of the updates. It was installing in the background. So we'll go into File Explorer, this PC, C drive, drivers. And now obviously we can see the network adapter down here, but we want to install everything going around on the motherboard itself. So we'll start with the LAN driver. Double click on the setup.exe. Next, and install. We'll see this LAN driver probably disappear for a few seconds, then it'll pop back up. There you go. Okay, and then finish, and that should pop up any second now. There we go. So then we'll install the Realtek with the Wickel Nahemic drivers. Set up here. This is for audio. Next. And another one that we need to restart, so just click first no here and finish. Then manually right click on the start button, shut down or sign out, and restart. All right, so then when we're back in Windows, we'll go to File Explorer, C drive, local disk, and drivers. Now we'll install the MediaTek wireless LAN drivers. Even though we're using the Ethernet, I like to have everything installed that needs to be installed. Finish, come back out of here. We'll go for the MediaTek Bluetooth now. And install. Finish, come back over here. We'll go ahead and install the graphics drivers. Okay here. And agree and continue. Custom Advanced, Next, and Perform a Clean Install. If you noticed, it installed NVIDIA drivers in the background because Windows thought it was okay. We can either use DDU to wipe those drivers or just perform a clean install for now. I'll probably, on the next driver update, do a DDU, but for now, okay, and then it just asks us to restart. So we'll restart later. And like I showed you before, we'll right click on the start button, shut down our sign out, and restart. So after a reboot, we're completely installed. Everything is installed here. So now my next steps that I like to do is I like to click on the start button and we'll go to update, check for updates. Now remember, we're on the latest thumb drive. And even though we've just created the latest, there's still a bunch of updates. So we'll come down here. These are already set to install and we'll select download and install. So now it's downloading that update. And then we'll install this one. I don't know why I didn't do it before. All right, and then we'll do a restart now. Now, after all the updates, we'll come back into Windows, Start. We'll do another check for updates. And there are a few more, so we'll do Install All, do another check for updates, and we'll cancel that. That's the Asus updates for the keyboard and mice. All right, so even though we've already done a restart, always come back in, make sure there's no more updates. So we're good there. So now one thing that we should install is the drivers and then the Polychrome RGB software. Now that we've installed all the drivers necessary and the Windows updates, I accept, next. Now we install the extras and finish here. Then we can click Start, All Apps, ASRock ASR RGB LED. And then here we can control everything on this RGB. Looks like it's not picking up anything. Oh, it is picking up the RAM. So if we select rainbow here, we'll do off. Perfect. Okay, so it is picking up the RAM, which is great. It looks like it's also hitting the fans. Okay, that's perfect. Even though it doesn't show that here, the ASRock software is a little bit weird. And actually, let's see how it works if I select strobe. We'll do red. There we go. Now the additional Arctic fans I've installed over here, the Arctic fans on the RGB over here, and the RAM are all lit RGB. The fan that it has on the rear and on the bottom down here inside of the case blowing air up is not an RGB fan. So you see how that works. I'm going to go ahead and just put that rainbow. So now that we've installed Windows, all the drivers and all the Windows updates, in order to eke out extra performance out of our video card and our monitor as well, we're going to go ahead and right click on the background and then we're going to select Show More Options. And finally, NVIDIA Control Panel. So here, we're going to click under Change Resolution. My monitor can do 120 Hertz. By default, the NVIDIA driver will always set your monitor to 60 Hertz. If your monitor can do 120, 140, 160, 240, 360, 500 Hertz, no matter what, when you install your drivers, you're stuck to 60 Hertz. So you need to come in here and select 120 Hertz. Make sure you're running under the correct HDMI 2.1 or DP cable, of course, so that you can get the most refresh rate out of your monitor and the correct resolution. After you select that, we'll click Apply. And when we get back in, we'll click yes. Now that change alone potentially is going to dramatically change the performance of your card. Now there's another one that's also going to help almost as much as that. A little bit further down, set up G-Sync. If your monitor is a G-Sync monitor, perfect. And if it's a FreeSync monitor, probably perfect as well, since NVIDIA cards also accept FreeSync. So here we're going to enable G-Sync, click it right here. Make sure that we have enable for windowed and full screen mode. So we'll click here and we'll click apply. Now we'll scroll down a little bit more, and by default it's going to be unchecked to enable settings for the selected display model because this monitor is not supported. But since it is unchecked, we'll just place a check there and we'll click apply, and that's it. So now not only have we enabled the highest refresh rate our monitor can handle, but we've also enabled G-Sync. Both of those are going to make our gaming experience buttery smooth. So in this series, I've shown you how to build inside of the HYTE Y40, then how to cable tool inside of the HYTE Y40 to make it look beautiful like it is right now. Then I showed you how to flash the BIOS, how to configure the BIOS, how to install Windows, how to install all the drivers and applications needed to make the system run well, and then how to install Windows updates and basic configuration within Windows, so that way you get the most performance out of your system possible. Now mind you, this isn't overclocking, but you need a stable platform before you even attempt to overclock. If you don't know where those blue screens are coming from. They could be from something completely different than the overclock. But I wanted to give you a strong foundation so that you can keep moving forward. As it is right now, you can install all your favorite games, all your video editing applications, all your workstation applications like SolidWorks or AutoCAD, even down to Word and Excel, PowerPoint, whatever you like to do on your PC, you can do it now. Coming up in my next video, we're going to have the performance of this case. How well does it handle heat inside of the case and noise? Now, mind you, I played with the fan profiles here, so it's a little bit louder than it should be, but I'll play with that a little bit later on. But you'll get to see the dB and the temperature inside of the case, and you'll get to see if this is the perfect case for you. And I'll have that in this video up above. If that's not here yet, it'll be the video on how to build the HYTE Y40 and how to cable manage it as well. Iggy with ThisBytesForYou out. See you guys.